This is ACOFAE. Laura Marie and Jessica Marie proudly present A Court of Fandoms and Exploration, a podcast. Fair warning, everything the hosts say is explicit, full of spoilers and adult content and shall not be used against them. They have opinions. Let's try not to drag anyone for expressing themselves and just have fun for an hour. We all deserve it.
There will be spoilers in this episode specifically from the worlds Sarah J. Maas has created, as well as topics mentioning sex work, physical violence, and substance abuse.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to A Court of Fandoms and Exploration, your weekly deep dive into the YA literature and fandoms that we love. I'm Laura Marie.
And I'm Jessica Marie.
And before we get started with everything, because this is about A Court of Silver Flames, of course, Jessica has something she wants to say.
I love TikTok. It has been an amazing place for my mental health, and not just for me, for everybody. I've been in quarantine for 344 days as of our recording today. And this past week has been awful. For the most part, I've been trying to avoid spoilers. I was really excited about popping onto TikTok all the time. I must have been really avoiding it because whenever I would go on TikTok, there would be this meltdown of people bullying and the fandom and death threats over a fucking book. I didn't even realize people were taking down their post. You're having death threats over a book. Yeah, mental health should be a priority for everybody. And do we as a community not already realize that we're bullied from people who do not understand the importance and significance reading is to us? And I know Easy Cat, his name is Jason, he had a really good post, and I can't put together words and convey how I feel in a proper way when it comes to bullying. It's a passion of mine, but there are so many other people who can just be more eloquent with how they say. And he does a great job in saying that we're bullying people amongst our community, and there are people in this world who have it so much worse. And that's just for existing. Not even having an opinion on a book. That's just for being who they are. And if you do listen to our podcast, you already know that we've always been about positivity, being kind, and being the versions of ourselves that we didn't necessarily have to look up to growing up. And I think it's important to recognize, and not just recognize, respect. Everybody's going to have their own opinions. They're going to be educated. We're going to have different experiences reading this book. And even Laura and I, which we were talking about earlier this week, we've both had very different experiences reading Silver Flames. And this is the first time that we're reading a book that was the first time for both of us, because Laura has been coaching me throughout this whole process. And even then, it's going to be interesting for her saying her opinions, which I completely agree with, but how the outcome emotionally is just kind of weird. Be kind, be respectful. There's a way to communicate without being so aggressive. And I think that, it was really, I know, Laura, when we were leading into the release, the release date, I go, "Are you excited?" And you said, "I'm really nervous." I go, "Why are you nervous?" And she goes, "This is going to get really toxic really quick." And I hated that feeling. And as somebody who lives with high functioning anxiety, I already didn't like that. I posted a TikTok that said, "I don't care. There's people who love Nesta. There's people who hate Nesta. Can't we just collectively appreciate that we're getting content?" And I hate this. I always use this example, but I feel like that girl in Mean Girls who doesn't even go here. She's like, "I wish we could just bake a cake of rainbow and smiles and we just eat it and be happy." I truly believe that. You're going to have a difference in opinions, and I know I'm rambling, and some people feel like you have to be team A or team B. It's this Captain America, Iron Man, Civil War thing. And I think it's also important to say, to not be gatekeeping certain characters, and we should normalize changing opinions. I feel like even if you were a Nesta hater and this book has changed your opinion, there are people who are going to say, well, I like Nesta first, or you don't have the right to like Nesta now because I liked her first and you hated her. Isn't the whole point of books and reading is to open our mind and to expand? And I mean, there's even research that says that people who read are able to have a more accepting world, you would think, and mindset, because you're exposed to different things. Like, shouldn't we just be embracing that? It's just like with politics. Normalize changing your opinions and based on your experiences. You know what? Before we, like, I don't want to keep rambling, but that was just really frustrating to go into something that I love so much, to see so much hate. Like, there's a reason I'm drinking for this episode.
I'm not drinking for this episode. I had canned artichokes on my pizza last night, and I am not well. I also want to throw in that it's really important to respect everybody's pronouns. And if you're not sure of somebody's pronouns, then go to their page and look and see if they've posted them, because that was a big part of the bullying that was taking place on TikTok. And
I didn't even see that yet.
Yeah, and that's really shitty. So we always try to respect people's pronouns, and it's like a decency thing. So please do that. So Jess, how about you start this? And because we haven't really talked about this, let's go through your initial reactions. Let's do a nice like sandwich situation where it's like good, bad, good.
Okay.
So that we'll end this episode on a positive note, and like mine can be in the middle. So go for it. I want to know what you think. What do you think about all of this?
If you've heard any of our previous episodes, I think I don't want to say I'm a Nesta hater. I hated Nesta's choices. And I have said from the very beginning, I wasn't a Nesta fan. I don't like how she handled things. However, when we wrapped the series up until ACOWAR, I go, I hate Nesta because, of course, it's like Harry Potter. Everyone's like, I want to be Gryffindor initially. So, of course, everybody wants to be Faerie and everybody wants to be these, like the main character. And as much as I wanted to, I'm probably going to start crying, but it's not because of Nesta. It's like my own shit that I have to deal with. But Nesta was like, why? I hate her, but she's the most like, I see a lot of myself in her. Like, if Bryce and Nesta had a baby, I feel like I'd be that baby. Especially with the way she internalizes everything, how she can come across. And I had said, there are things about Nesta that I don't like, and I think that is probably very reflective of the things that I don't like about myself. So I went into Silver Flames with an open mind, but knowing she had made shitty choices. And I think peppered throughout, like, I know I had messaged you with things that Nesta had said that triggered me. Like, I wasn't upset for her. I was upset for myself. And I was talking to somebody we both know, and I know that this book, from the positive things that I've seen, a lot of people have felt a lot of closure and help, and they've said that this has helped them, like accepting themselves. And there were definitely things where I was like, ooh, my therapist would not have approved of any of this. Or even, I love the part where she's like, I can't fix me. Like, how am I supposed to fix me? And then, that goes back and forth. We're like, well, did you try fixing yourself in the first place? But then you go to like another thing that I deal with of imposter syndrome was like, you feel defeated. Then I was saying, maybe, and this could be considered problematic because you do have some people who are holding on to this so much. But I feel like for me, it was, I thought I dealt with my shit, and this just kind of triggered and resurfaced everything that I thought I had. So I think that's why I really, really liked this book. It had nothing to do with Nesta. I had everything to do with myself. So I don't know. That's where I am. Did I love the smut? Initially, I was like, what is going on? And I'm blushing, and we'll get into that later because we have to get into that later. And now I'm like, if it's anything less than that in the next book, I'm not having it. I guess those were my initial reactions. Yesterday, I had a book hangover. I'm a little bit better today. We'll see.
That was a very good kind of like summary of your feelings. I had like the opposite reaction to this. I understand objectively that this is a good book. I know that it will help a lot of people and it will change people's lives, and it's very important to them, and it is a part of a journey that a lot of people are on, and that it will become very special. I understand that. I did not care for this book at all. I was just kind of angry with Nesta the whole time. I'm going to be the odd one. I still really love the inner circle. I still really love, all of the characters. I mean, I'm happy for Nesta. I'm happy that she's worked through all of her shit and now we can pivot to another character in another book. I'm happy that she has found a purpose and is with her family, her found family, and also her blood family. So I'm happy for that. I just was so frustrated with her the whole time. Every single time she was presented with a path of doing and saying the right thing or doing the opposite of that, she always did the opposite. And it was just oh my God, again, we're going to have to go through 6 more chapters for you to work your shit out before we get any plot. And I think that is really my main criticism. What the fuck is the plot in this book? I really don't know. Yes, I mean, I know there's Koschei and the queen and the dread trove, which is just fucking hilarious. Okay, we're all pirates. What is that? Oh, I will say, and this is also going to be, controversial. I like the name of the baby. I like Nyx.
I like Nyx.
People hate it. I love it. I was Nyx for Halloween in October. I love it. Little funny story with that. We were doing a Zoom trivia with my husband's family, and everyone was going around the squares being what are you dressed as? What are you dressed as? And there was a lot of Carol Baskins and things like that. And they were Laura, what are you? I was I'm the goddess Nyx, the goddess of night, darkness, madness, and sleep and death. And everyone was just moving on.
I like the significance of the name, because they are the night court and the night is so important to them, especially when you unravel everything. And I like that they said the goddess Nyx for a boy name, how you so often hear, quote unquote traditional boys' names as girls or names that are considered ambiguous. However, I like the interchangeability of it.
Yeah, I had no problem with it. I don't know.
I think it's cute.
People are pressed about it, but they're pressed about a lot of things.
What were they going to name him, Bob?
Yeah. Those are pretty much my initial reactions. So I feel a little bit better about Nesta, and of course I have moments in the book that I enjoyed. The smut, obviously, I didn't need to know that Cassian has a giant horse cock, but now that I do,
I did. I assumed it, but I'm glad it was confirmed.
I also didn't need to know that they have a jizz kink, but now that I do, it's all I think about. This is where I stand on everything. I'm really glad that Sarah has moved out of YA. I'm happy for her as an author. I'm happy for us as readers, because every book that she's going to write, if this is the standard that she set for herself,
she just set the bar high.
Everything beyond this is going to be epic. So I'm happy for this as kind of I think of it personally as a bridge book. So we have Faerie's story, and then we have this bridge book with Nesta finally coming back into the inner circle, and then now we're gonna get plot maybe in the next book, but I don't even know what the next book is or when it's coming out or whatever. So those are my initial reactions.
Even though she went there in this book, when people talk about spice, I feel like a different word needs to be created, because this was the steamiest thing I've ever read. I thought I had read spice before. Joke's on me. She did an IG Live with Steph, ideally realistic reviews. She's on Instagram. She said she didn't know which one had more fluids, this or Crescent City 2. So she assumed initially it was this one. But then Sarah is still in the editing process, and you could see her mind going, can I add more? So I have no idea what we're going to get for Crescent City 2. I also can't imagine and don't want to imagine our resident Chad Hunt with a jizz kink.
I shouldn't.
Okay, I'm trying not to. I'm trying to improve myself and be better and be more accepting. So if we do have listeners who are into that, I am sorry. This is nothing against you. This is completely like from my POV. So
Jess is sheltered. Please remember this.
Have we like not discussed my little bubble of I had no idea there was a knife kink, and then TikTok came around, and now I didn't even realize this was a kink. And I texted you and I go, or I think I voice memoed you and I go, this is like a 2-person bukkake. Like what else?
It was everywhere. It was everywhere. It was on all the surfaces. So as long as
he didn't like he was never even washing. Was he washing his sheets? Was the house changing them? The house. We love the house. MVP.
I have to think the house was changing the sheets.
I don't know. He was like, I pumped myself dry, like, and then laid in it on your bed. I don't know. I really hope the house like came through. And then I need to know, because poor Az, like he's like immersed in this mate scent and sex scent.
Wait. Do you just want to like transition and just talk about Az? I know you have a notepad full of notes.
Not yet.
Okay.
Not yet. But I did have a question about, okay, so remember the first night Nesta was getting herself off to the idea of Cass. And so she told the house, she's like, don't come back till the morning. Do you think at any point the house kind of soundproofed wherever Nesta and Cass were, the way Rhys used his magic at the camps for him and Feyre, so nobody heard them?
That's a good question and something I haven't considered. If the house was really a true friend, then you would think so. But also the house is into the smut, so the house might be like celebrating all of it. I don't know.
I like the house.
My husband made me put headphones on to listen to this after the skull fucking at the table scene, and he was just like, no, please.
Skull fucking? I thought I thought the table was just the dining room table where she just like gave him a head, but he didn't fuck her.
He fucked her mouth.
Oh yeah, that.
Which is your what?
Oh well. Well, I'm thinking of like catacomb skulls, not her actual like fucking her mouth.
Jess is sheltered.
You know, I can't even. That's my life. Somebody teach me. Well, like I don't know. No guys are listening, so it really doesn't matter. Poor Sam. Like was that. What was his reaction? Was he like, "That's it"? Is that usually his reaction when you're listening to certain things?
No. Certain descriptors that were used, he was just like, I just cannot. You know, all the thrusting and then the teeth. He was just like,
poor throat.
She likes it. Yeah. All of that. You know, I didn't need to know all of that, but now that I do, it was like my big takeaway from this whole book. Just God. And also, I know it's been said on TikTok and stuff, but Chapter 55 is nothing. It is gone. Everybody that has those Chapter 55 like sweatshirts and like we survived Chapter 55. It's like, okay, did you survive?
But what do you say for this one? Do you say Chapter 22, Chapter 26, Chapter 41?
Just say the book.
Well, and we've said Chapter 55 was spicy for YA, I guess. But you and I had openly said like Chapter 55 isn't really anything. It's nice. It's sweet. It's a moment. I've been on Chapter 54 for my life.
So as long as we're kind of just talking about the sex, let's talk about the fact that Nesta kind of uses it as a distraction. This is my personal opinion. I personally believe that Nesta uses, now up until a point, obviously, uses the sex and uses the training and like finding purpose with the Valkyries as a way to just not work on herself at all. She's channeling all of her energy and everything into these new things, and she's not actually doing any of the internal work through her trauma that she is up there to do, which, I mean, fine, it's a story, whatever, she's not real. But she was really shitty to Cassian that first time in the stairwell. She's like, quick off the mark. Like, you know that hurt him. Just like, really? Damn.
I like that later in the book, she says, like, you are good, brave, brilliant. I could kill anyone who has ever made you feel less than that. And she continues to say, like, she acknowledges that she's one of those people. So she knows she doesn't deserve him. And I appreciate that growth and recognition in herself. But it wasn't until Amren called her out on her shit, which a lot of people, and Amren gets a lot of shit in this book too, which I feel like anybody who's, okay, like, people, we're going to get so attacked for this episode. Anybody who has read the last 3.5 books, this is not out of character for Amren. Saying any of this, being this way, I do think that TikTok and social media, and we've given a voice to a lot of these characters, but this goes back to in one of our previous episodes, just because we've created these worlds, and that's not how the character came out or the story came out, is it really fair for us to be frustrated with characters if they don't come out the way we want to in our head? And I say that because a lot of the way Amren's portrayed is she's indifferent, she loves shiny things, blah, blah, blah. Yes, that's still true. I don't deny any of that. I kind of love that Nesta walked in on her fucking Varian. I really love that because I'm like, that's in character for Amren too. Like, she called her out on her shit, right? And I told you, Laura, I said, you would do the same. Not only would you have done the same thing to myself, to our friends. Like, you can be doing all the outer work. What are you doing to fix it inside? You're using me as a friend. You're using me as a shield. I'm enabling you at this point. And I feel like not everybody has a group of friends who will call them out on their shit. You know, you don't go out with the intent of looking for friends who like, I want somebody who is direct. You gravitate towards those people. And you don't need a yes man. Having that person who's going to be honest with you and give you that feedback that nobody else is willing to give, I think that takes a strong person and a special person. And Nesta wasn't willing at the time to hear that and accept that because she hadn't done the inner work yet. I like Amren. Nothing she did or said was out of character in everything, whether she was voting against her during telling her about her powers, talking to her as a friend, because Nesta was the one person that Amren felt she was a friend in the earlier books and wanting to help and wanting to connect and being that thing that's something very old and she had that connection with. It's not, I don't know.
I think all of the inner circle was portrayed in character.
Yeah.
I don't see why people are hating on any of the inner circle. I mean, I love that now they can all just say fucking motherfucker. Like, it's great. It makes them a little bit more real than they were before, because before, like, I mean, it was just YA, but like their language was kind of censored, their actions were kind of censored, and now we get it all. And I really love that. Everyone is saying Rhys is out of character. I disagree completely. No. Something I also really disagree with are people saying that Rhys putting the shield on Feyre is exactly the same as Tamlin locking her in the house. No, I disagree.
Yeah. I didn't even know that was being said about the shield, but no. I love the inner circle and inner court, however people use it interchangeably. I don't think anything they did was out of character. I don't even see her being in that shield. It wasn't just for her. It was for his kid. And they came up with that compromise. It wasn't where Tamlin said, I need you to stay here. I don't know what's going on out there. Even if that conversation happened where he didn't lock her up there, the whole storyline would have been completely different if there was the communication, which is a running theme. But there was communication in this decision. Maybe not, when you were finding that she was, knocking on death's door, part of it. But there was an agreement that, look, yes, you can protect me. Yes, you could protect our child. This isn't out of character. I just don't understand. And I saw a really good TikTok where somebody was even saying, she goes, you know what? If this pregnancy stuff had been thrown into Frost and Starlight, especially since they were already like on the pregnancy talk, like an epilogue of Frost and Starlight, this wouldn't even be a running discussion for this book. Because we would have already known and gone into Silver Flames knowing that he was protective, knowing this was going to happen, blah, blah, blah. Even though if you've read the last 3.5 books, you knew he was not overprotective, but very protective of Faerie. He's always said his mate was going to come first before anything. And I just don't see anything out of character, and I don't know why people are acting like it is.
And people saying that Rhys is like a douchebag. It's like, okay.
He was never not. I loved it.
But he's also, like, if you take a step back, he is the leader of an enormous territory. Faerie is a leader of an enormous territory. They have to be very careful about optics, about political connections, about everything that they do. It's like people that are angry about this have never watched like a political thriller, or, you know, you've never watched Rain on the CW. Like, playing politics is really important, and optics are really important. And because they are the leaders, they have to keep everybody in line. Like, no, you can't start a blood feud over someone who isn't your mate. We have to keep everything together because there's a war coming. You have to play the long game. You have to have the world view when you are on like the big stage.
And again, people are gonna fucking tear us apart, and I don't even care. People are like, he doesn't deserve to run a country because that High King, High Queen storyline, it was just touched upon. That is totally setting up something for a different book, because Prythian hasn't had a High King in all these years, not just these years, but even when you go back to ACOWAR, it was Rhys who had collectively pulled all the courts together, and it was Rhys who led everybody. He might not be the strongest, but like, he is the most powerful High Lord. He has that foresight of being able to take a step back and thinking bigger picture and understanding the importance of what it means. Can he be a little rose-colored glasses? When it comes to Faerie, absolutely. However, his relationship with Faerie, knowing that she's High Lady, allows him to say, you know, she's able to not just say like, oh, well, I'm your lady. No, we are equals, and we're both having a say in this, and this is how we're going to move forward. And I think that's really important in regards to Rhys's character. This attack on his character is unnecessary, because what have you been reading the last 3.5 books, unless you were only in it for the romance, which is quite possible. But even like you were saying, if you haven't watched a political drama, or if you haven't watched like historical fiction, there is realism within that. It still happens now.
And let's not forget, if Rhys wanted to be a dictator or whatever, then he wouldn't have had everybody vote on whether to tell Nesta or not. And then he wouldn't have been like, you know what? Okay, Faerie is going to be the deciding vote here because her vote is just as much as mine. You know, like, that conversation wouldn't have happened.
And he doesn't say like, well, I'm High Lord, so my vote will count twice.
Right.
Like, everybody is like, even though like, you can't even say like technically he has 2 votes, because Faerie doesn't always vote with him, because she was the first one to say no. Nesta absolutely has to know. She has a right to know what these swords are, these shields, blah blah. Like, she had a right to know, and she's I think that was really important. And I like that Rhys comes to Nesta's defense. And I know, I told you, I said I would have voted Nesta to know. I think she needed to know, but but I think it goes, maybe it's just who we are as people, where we open our minds a little bit or a lot to say, this is how I'm voting. However, I understand and respect that this is where your vote is coming from.
Yeah.
Do I understand why Amren voted no, she shouldn't? No, absolutely. I get it, especially with their history. I think, Laura, you had made a point saying, like, what has Nesta done to try up into this point? She hasn't channeled her magic. She hasn't wanted to acknowledge it. I think that was all really important.
And, okay, so Nesta, obviously, is the MC in this book. She can, like, blacksmith new very powerful legendary weapons. Okay, cool. She is death personified. Okay, cool. She can wear the mask. Awesome. The dread I can't say it with a straight face, the dread trove. Do we think that the horn in Crescent City is part of the dread trove?
It could be.
Yeah, I say yes.
We already had official confirmation from Sarah recently how all the worlds are integrated. You have word gates and Aelin falling through the worlds. And in this book, you have the red star, which quote unquote was a bad omen, but we know that it's Aelin, which, oh man, let's not forget that I had just finished KOA and I still haven't been computing my feels for KOA because a day and a half later, I was not even 24 hours later, I was reading Silver Flames. So there were a lot of KOA stuff in here. Even with the live, Nesta, live. And I was like, Manon! I was just crying.
Or, Sarah Lake's her mantras, the one in this book is keep reaching your hand out, which I was a little bit frustrated with because I was thinking to myself, okay, how many times do you reach your hand out before it's just enough? And I think that is a good place to talk about the first 6 chapters, because the first 6 chapters are what got everybody so fucking pressed about this book. And Jess, I know you said it on TikTok, but I guess I didn't understand how many people were unfamiliar with the concept of an intervention.
Right. And then there was also a comment on the TikTok that had mentioned, they go, yeah, I understand interventions, but being forced to go to the House of Wind, that's when you're forced to go to rehab.
Yeah.
That's literally what this is. And it's not because, people do interventions and they have these, not because they don't love you, it's because they absolutely love you and they don't know what else to do. They feel helpless and they're hoping that by them sharing their not hopelessness towards the person, but helplessness towards the situation, that love will be felt. And a lot of times in these scenarios, not just a lot of times, in these scenarios, people are going through their own shit. So they have to want to help themselves too. And sometimes you can do it by yourself, and that's great if you can. And sometimes you can't, and it needs to be forced. And sometimes you have to be well, as long as it's happening, then, but I understand later on in Nesta's fear where, the House of Wind is the shit. She's getting bubble baths. She's training. She's forming these relationships. She's working in the library. And then at some point she has the fear of, well, what's going to happen when I go back to real life? And I think a lot of people can relate to that, whether you've been in rehab or having substance abuse situations or even ED. You're great when you're hospitalized and everything's controlled and routined, but what's going to happen when you step outside of that and you're not sure of yourself in that moment too? You're I'm great in this scenario, but what's going to happen when I get back into the quote unquote real world? That's when the real work starts. And I do feel bad for Nesta because I think it also shows her growth that she's able to acknowledge that. And there's fear with that. She might not be communicating that fear. And we know that through her actions of keep choosing, I don't want to say regressing, but keep defaulting back to the negative choices in which she keeps defaulting to, which I know is a big criticism of yours, Laura. But I feel that's just really real life that some, and I think a lot of people they fall back on the default because that's what they know, because applying that work is the real strength and the real growth and the real fear, if anything, to keep going. Because that's your, the fear is what's stopping you. Or even when we started the podcast, we're this is completely outside of our comfort zone. Do we even want to do it? And that's so menial compared to this situation. But just trying to understand how people process it differently. I think that's what Sarah was trying to convey in her writing.
Oh, absolutely. And as you were saying, the person that is the focus of the intervention is always going to not appreciate it, obviously, and get defensive and get angry and say well, screw you. But also, and there's a part in there where it's Nesta kind of knew that this was coming with the bar bill. She says ooh, maybe I pushed it a little too far. And then Reese talks about optics, we're the leaders. That looks really bad on us. And also, Nesta was trading on her relationship to Rhys and Feyre. Like, people weren't going to come after her because they know that, you know, the High Lady is her sister, and she knew that. And just the whole situation was really shitty. I also want to point out, like, she's been doing this for, like, what, 2 years? You know?
And Amren was fighting, now we know, Amren was fighting for her for those 2 years. And she goes, I was your shield for 2 years at some point. And that was the fight on the barge where she's like, you're pathetic. And of course, when you are when you're the person who is going through these situations, everything's going to feel like an attack, you know? And I do feel there was another part, even with that feeling an attack, I was very empathetic, even based on a scenario that happened to me in real life with family recently, where no matter how much you grow, and once Nesta was actually finally putting the work in, and Rhys would say, you know, he would do his Damati thing and be like, be nice to Gwen. Or when Elaine was saying, it's her birthday, can you be like, I have reacted like that. Fuck you. Like, you don't know. You don't see the growth because I'm still this one person in your head, which is where I appreciated Cass and Az saying, you guys, that was not right. You don't know what we know. You don't see what we see. You have this version in your head of her. And it's frustrating where, you know, when you do start trying and then people still don't see that version of you. Like, I can see that does knock you back. You're like, fuck, man. Like, what else do I have to do?
But also, on the flip side of that, you know, the private meeting with Elaine in the House of Wind just got, you know, Nesta blew her out of the water for, like, almost no reason.
That part, yeah, I agree there. I wasn't referring to the House of Wind. I was referring to Solstice. But it was her own trigger. But that's because she hadn't done, she was still in the process of doing the internal work, or she hadn't started the internal work yet, because it was completely triggered by the death of her father. It had nothing to do with Elaine. Elaine was just kind of asking questions.
Elaine was trying, right?
Elaine was trying. That was the first time that she had gone up there since essentially like moving her out of her apartment.
Right. And speaking of Elaine, but I still don't like Elaine for reasons, but I did really like when Elaine stood up for herself and was like, you know, basically, screw you. My trauma and what happened to me affects me, and all you ever do is think about how it affects you. So you are afraid.
You weren't the only one who went through this.
Yeah, and it's also like, oh, you're afraid to scry with the bones and stones because you remember that I was taken. What about me? Like, I liked that. I really liked that Elaine kind of stepped up. And I also kind of see where Elaine's going to go when some of the characters were saying like, oh, you know, Elaine or Nesta says like, oh, you're boring. Maybe you'll finally be interesting. It's like, oh, yeah, okay. And then so I think.
Well, how about in the Face Sand chapter where even Feyre goes to Rhys and you think Elaine is boring? And he's like, I didn't say that, but yes, but we haven't given her, you know, like maybe she has been kept in this box of Elaine is the boring one who just plants flowers, which I get. Like, I get where everyone's like, your family's starving, you can't grow fucking food. I get that criticism. But he goes, maybe she's never had the chance. We've never let her.
She's just fulfilling like our expectations of her. You know, everybody says like, oh, she's boring. Oh, you know, she's quiet, whatever. That's what she has always been expected to be. So she's going to be like that for everybody because she thinks that that's what her role is. I mean, there's a lot there, but obviously I'm not going to harp on Elaine. She's still boring. And with the Az chapter and Elaine. So
that's another.
That's when we talk about Az specifically. Okay, I have something. Solstice.
Oh, I had a Solstice note. I started crying. I sent Eddie like this snap of me sobbing when he got her a fucking faerie mixtape I thought
So
that was
cute.
the sweetest thing. It was so sweet and it was so thoughtful, and he put so much thought into it. Not just that one, but even like the previous year that we find out what it is. I was just, this man, male, whatever, flew to the hewn city, a place that he despises, to ensure he was like capturing the things that that light her up, that he saw brought her the purest joy that he had never. That male. I don't even know. I feel like over the course of this book, I've always been like, oh, I like Az. He's my number 2. Reese will always be my number 1. I've had growth. And then, Laura, you just called me out on my shit, and you were like, you like frat boys. You will always like frat boys, like fratty boys deep in heart, because they bring you joy and they make you laugh, which is like, I don't make myself laugh all the time. So like, it's just, so I finally gave into it. Cass is my number 2. Who knows if that'll change when Az's book comes out. But I thought that was just so sweet and so thoughtful. And I simp for Cass. I mean, I simp for Reese harder, but
you know, she shat on that gift too. She was like, I don't want this. I can't accept this. You know,
and he's like, it's not a fucking, that whole scene, because I reread it this morning, where he goes, it's a gift, not a fucking wedding ring. Yes, be upset as Cass. He's so, I like when he gets upset with her, because then it shows that he's not completely blinded by the mating bond that he knows is there. She's refused, and he calls her out on that too. He's like, you, even later, he goes, ask me why I left immediately after, like the morning after, aside from the snowball fight. He goes, I knew, and you weren't willing to accept it. And he goes, I couldn't scare you away.
And he also says, like, you pledged, like, forever. You pledged forever, and that we're the only ones for each other. And, like, now you're freaked out. And she's like, well, it's my last, like, tie to humanity. It's like, what?
Take my humanity, what I would give. Fuck you, Nesta. I will trade places with you any day. And not just because you're getting Cass's horse cock.
It's like my whole forearm.
I mean, that wouldn't fit in me, but maybe if I was Fae, because everything's, like, elongated. But take my humanity, Nesta. I will switch places in your Fae body and Faeness every way. I already have the tits. Like, I don't know what else to tell you.
It was really frustrating. I thought all of Solstice was really frustrating because Nesta didn't want to be alone, so her power created this sentient house for her. It's like Smart House 2.0. I'm fine with it. We know that the house will give her whatever she wants. We know this. She has that really cute sleepover with the, Pegasus or whatever, and the bubble baths and, cake, all that stuff. So we know that the house will give her stuff. Nesta shows up to Solstice with no gifts.
It's not like she was dragged there anyway. She even said, she's like, I don't have gifts. All she could have literally said to the house is, she didn't have to be specific. She could, can you give me a gift that you think Pharaoh would like? Can you give me a gift that Cassian would like?
Or even not
she
even.
Didn't put thought into it.
She could have even just written a letter.
Isn't that one of the steps in AA? Like admitting you fucked up?
She just shows up totally empty-handed, and at this point she's starting to realize that all of this was for her own good. She's at this point, she's got her purpose, she's got everything, and it made me so mad. She doesn't have any money, she doesn't need money, and also she didn't ask. She could have been like, okay, fine, yes, I will go, but I don't have any gifts or anything. Could I get some fucking money for a gift? She didn't put in anything. And it is not difficult to take a Post-it note and say, hey, I love you.
Right.
That could have been enough. I'm sure that would have been enough.
Az got Cass beef jerky.
Yeah, come on. The bar is not high here. We know that Moore gives really crappy gifts. It's part of her whole personality. Just try.
I saw a really funny TikTok where someone was, doing the intercourt Christmas exchange, the solstice exchange. And in the TikTok, she hands, Cassian pulls out a butter knife. And he's like, a butter knife? And she goes, it's the only knife you don't have. I was laughing so hard this morning. I was like, it's true. It is the only knife he doesn't have. But it's also, not out of character for Moore to give him a butter knife.
It's totally in character, absolutely. She gives terrible gifts. We know this.
I like it. Oh, but Az's gift was so thoughtful. Like, did you just want to squeeze him? We love Az.
We still love Az.
We still love Az. That has not changed. I feel like a lot of people are going to be like, oh, if you're not team A or team B, who were you here for? I'm team for the book. I'm here for the fucking book.
Yeah, for real. Well, and we're going to talk about Az a little bit later because
I have a legal pad, like 2 pages of legal notes.
So let's talk about something that I've been thinking about. So Jess, you posted on the Instagram when Sarah put the quote out about like Nesta dropping her elbow, right?
Right.
And you were like, oh, this is going to be, he's going to come behind her and he's going to.
I thought it was going to be a fucking trope. I swear. And even like when I did the poll, I was like, anybody else with me? Only 2 people did not think it was going to be that.
Yeah. And all of a sudden we learn that, okay, Nesta wants the priestesses to train. We love this. You know, it was excellent. I like that she is checking the thing, whatever, but she knows that because the library is a place of like recovery for trauma and sexual assault, that the priestesses there will be very cagey about having a male instructor. So she, you know, sets this whole thing up so that Cass will come and correct her in a very like instructor teacher appropriate way. And like he like touches her very briefly and then steps back, you know, pretty far and says like, okay, show me. And she's on the balcony so everybody sees her. And I thought that was really interesting because we were all set up for the come behind you and like sexy trope, but it wasn't that at all. And I thought, I've thought this several times throughout the book, that like Sarah is on some level aware of the tropes that we associate with her and the words that we associate with her, and just kind of the vibe of the fandom in general. And I feel like she kind of put that in there, like the smutty book club, like, yeah, the velvet wrap steel, she only used that once, but it was like, haha. And
I know.
Yeah. So I thought that was really interesting, and just something that was a callback to us assuming something about a situation and being completely wrong, just like the mask. Right? Everybody freaked out about the mask. We all assumed it was this one thing. Did anyone think it was going to be part of a creepy dread trove? No. We were judging something and we had no idea where Sarah was taking it. And that just goes back to the toxic fandom.
I know one of my theories with the mask was, I was like, oh, there's going to be a masked ball, but there's a day court insignia, but there was orange, so there's going to be a lot of autumn court, and we got autumn court by way of Eris. We definitely got a ball. Maybe it wasn't a masquerade, but we did not get as much of Vasa, Jurian, and Lucian as I was expecting, especially with my first initial takeaway with the cover, that Jurian and Vasa are going to be a thing.
I hope so. They feel very like enemies to lovers, combative.
Yeah, but there's a line in this book. It's like a throwaway line Lucian says during Solstice, because they were like, oh, how's the spring court or something? And he's like, how do you think Tamlin's doing? He just, he's still bitter that Feyre left him. And she's with his mate, and now she's pregnant, and they were like, oh, well, how's Jurian and Vasa? And they're like, oh, well, they're doing what they do best, like in regards to the arguing. And I go, that's something, that's totally going to be something. But in a previous episode, didn't you were really here for the Lucian Vasa?
Well, I'm not here for Lucian and Elaine. I'm not.
Okay, since we are talking about Elaine and Lucian there, I have a question. It's a general question. Feel free to add your opinion. So you know how everybody's always like, how come everybody tells Moore to just let Az know, but no one's ever really telling Elaine, just let Lucian know. Like, why hasn't she rejected the mating bond yet? We know that can be a thing. It's been 2 years. Or that was the other thing. Is it a political thing? Is it because they know they eventually need to have everybody kind of on the same side? I don't think Elaine's that smart, but if Rhys is kind of saying like, let's just be copacetic about everything.
That's a good question. I don't know, although I feel like it is pretty much assumed that she's rejected the mating bond through her actions.
Yeah, through her actions, but I feel in the Fae world, you know, you have the food exchange or whatever, and then you have the mating bond, and you accept it, and forever, blah, blah, blah. I feel like the same thing needs to be vocally denounced in order for it to, because he's still getting her presents, he's still giving her, and I mean, I understand that the mating bond, even if it's rejected, you had said, it's like, just because it's rejected, that doesn't mean it still doesn't stay with you. It was just a question that I had. I don't know why she hasn't formally rejected it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not like she's fucking ass. Like,
no, but she wants to be choked by him. That's for damn sure.
Yeah, but she also like doesn't do anything. I don't know. Part of me feels like we're not giving Elaine enough credit, and that it might be a political thing. I feel like maybe she pays more attention to the things that Rhys does and like how he kind of runs things than we give her credit for. Of course, we don't know. We don't know her POV.
Just like we never really had an Az POV till now.
Do you want to go into Az?
Well, you go in because he's your man.
Az is my favorite. I love Az. I understand that people are upset about the bonus chapter. I get that because I feel like we as a fandom, I'm excluding myself here though, but the fandom in general has given him a personality that was not presented to us in the pages. So we assume he's a certain way, but we have nothing to back that up. And if you look at what's actually in the books, on the pages, the conversations, because we don't have his internal thoughts except for this book, he's very damaged. He had a horrific childhood. He has anger issues. He tortures people. That's his job. He's a spy. That's his job. He's always away in darkness. And so if you gave him like this soft boy kind of persona, right? If that's what your image of him was, then yeah, I can see how the Az chapter would bother you. But if you went from what's on the page, then you're just like, oh my God, finally, I just want to see like what is going on in his head. And he's sad and he's lonely and he's bitter, and there's nothing wrong with that. And Sarah addressed a huge plot point that people use to criticize her, like, oh, 3 sisters in the cauldron, they're gonna end up with all the bat boys. And he says that, like, why not me? Why am I the only one that isn't chosen? What is wrong with me? Like, yeah, I feel like I'm owed her, because why wouldn't I feel that way?
I agree with you, because I'm like looking at my notes and I was like, he's coming from a place of hurt, of pain and loneliness. And he's happy for his friends, but he's also like, he sees it as his brothers and himself. Like, we've all gone through they've all gone through trauma. They've all gone through some shit. And I don't think he's looking at being owed Elaine as like a property thing. I think he feels like, I want to be owed happiness. And right now, Az associates happiness with Elaine. Just like we know that he wanted to be with Mor, and he felt like Mor was for him, but he also didn't feel like he was good enough, you know? And I did feel bad for Az. And I also didn't understand, people felt a need, you know, especially with the discussion regarding the Az chapter. People, again, this is like clearly, if you're listening to our podcast, we're like going back and forth. Why do people feel a need to pick side? Oh, Rhys is an asshole in this scene. No, I like Az. So all of a sudden, and there was a really good TikTok that I had sent you this morning. You could be both of them. You can see where both sides are coming from. I feel bad for Az. He's, especially when he's up in the House of Wind. He was like, you know, all around, not just the mating, you know, it was more the mating bond and happiness and love with Feyre and Rhys, but now he's consumed by it with Cass and Nesta, even prior to the mating bond, because even when Rhys would stop by, before they were even sleeping together, their attraction to each other was so strong. He goes, what the hell are you guys doing up here? It smells of, he didn't even say, it reeks of sex, and they hadn't slept together. So, and like, Az is just all about it, which I also like when Az walks in on them in like chapter 22, 23. He's like, you just got your cock sucked at dinner.
I have a say.
And Cass is like, you right, my bad.
Yeah, and that's a respect thing also too. I feel like for a large part of this book that everybody's kind of like wrapped up in their own shit, right? And I like that. Az consistently kind of makes noise, you know, like, hello, I'm here, wah, wah, wah.
I like it because he's the shadow singer. You know, he doesn't make noise. So the amount of things and that's why I asked about the house soundproofing things. I'm here. I think it's just like when you're listening in on your parents when you're younger, you're so quiet to a certain point until you just like have to scurry away.
I also feel like we need to appreciate Az's personality as a whole. Like, remember when Nesta fell down the stairs and Az kind of looks at her at breakfast? He's like, did someone push you? It's like, there's a dry humor that we got in ACOWAR.
I'm telling you, TikTok has been really nice to like for me to think, ooh, that's a good one and that's a good point. But I really liked the one where somebody brought up a really good point of we are seeing damaged Azrael right now. And somebody equated it to seeing Daddy Phantom Hands, you know, but we grew with Dorian and we saw the soft side and then we were like, hey, well, you were A the whole time. But I was like, hey. And I feel like because we didn't see the before, everyone is flipping out in this whole Az section. We don't know his backstory, so everybody's really jumping the gun here in character accusation, you know, for lack of a better word. This goes back to what we say about fanfic, the worlds that we create in our head. And Kaven had a really good TikTok live, and she was saying that a lot of the times, especially in YA or just fantasy novels in general, it's the fandom that builds the characters. We are only given what we're given through the author, what's on the page. And the reason the fandoms, you kind of immerse yourselves in them are these worlds that you create and the characters and the personalities that you add to them. So again, is it fair, and it's not, to be accusing this man? We don't know his trauma. We know a little bit of it. We know the shit his half-brothers put him through. We know his mother wasn't there. We knew that he wasn't, like, his best friends had to teach him how to fly as a preteen. You know, and that's not even saying what he has probably, like, they've all been to battle. They've all been to war. But based on his skill set, he's definitely seen some shit that other people probably haven't seen. I feel for this guy. I feel so bad. I also, that being said, I don't think Rhys was wrong in having this conversation with him. Again, it's not out of character. He was acting not even twofold, more than that. He was acting as a friend. He had to act as a friend, a High Lord, and a brother-in-law all at the same time. And Rhys was having all these same thoughts about Feyre. Cass was having all these same thoughts about Nesta. If Az wants to have these sexual thoughts about Elaine, go ahead. But, you know, Rhys is also like, but if you need to get your fix, here, like, I'll get you somebody.
Yeah, I feel like people are just a little bit shaken because Az is suddenly horny. But I think that's...
Again, it's one chapter. And why are we shaking that he's horny? Sarah literally said he's a freak in a good way. We were all excited about Az being a freak and how good he's going to be in bed. And, oh, that's going to be the best sex ever, even if it's in our head with, you know, the proper term. Thanks, TikTok. I'm really exposing, like, my sexual awareness of fictophilia, which is being sexually aroused by fictional characters. Okay, and... everything that everybody has already put out there, we're seeing in chapter, and now everybody's taking a step back. We're like, oh, well, that's not what I wanted to see. What?
Well, it's hypocritical because Nesta and Cass have been fucking the entire book. Cass is talking about, like, his hands around his cock, like, the whole book. And then all of a sudden, Az has, like, 2 thoughts because he's completely lonely and devastated, and everybody's so upset about it.
Somebody tell me a time that they haven't been lonely and wanted a little, like, physical, you know, attention.
And then everybody gets really upset because he regifted the necklace, which, whatever, I'm not upset about that at all.
I'd be upset if I was Gwen. Like, if I find out later that it wasn't for me. Like, when people regift an engagement ring, that would be upsetting for me.
Yeah, I can see that. But also, like, you know, Elaine is frustrating in a lot of ways, but the fact that she was like gung-ho for this.
Who was gung-ho?
Elaine. Because like they were going to kiss, right? They were.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
And because he didn't, because Reese called him out on it, then she returned the necklace.
Yeah. She was like, oh, okay, well, fine. It's like, what? Oh,
Meanwhile,
okay.
like, why are you holding that against Az? It has nothing to do with Az. It has everything to do with Reese.
Yeah.
I think she was like, oh, it's a bad mistake. Whatever.
But yeah, but even that, even if Elaine didn't know that Reese is the one that kind of, ended that situation between her and Az, it's an honorable thing to do, to be like, no. So I just don't understand why she would be so angry about it, because he like a feeling of rejection or whatever, because he did the right thing. He didn't want to do the right thing. He was pretty much forced to do the right thing, but like,
right.
She doesn't, we have to assume that she doesn't know that. So all of it is very, very frustrating. Kind of jumping off from that though, Azriel has said that his shadows retreat when he's around Elaine, which is like a contributing factor to him thinking that she is the one for him. But when he is around Gwen, his shadows play with her and sing with her. And I feel like that is more important of a connection, because it's not about taking away all of the darkness. It's about like embracing kind of who you are fully. And his shadows are so much a part of him that if they were gone completely, he would be a different person.
Right. I also like when Gwen goes, do you sing? And as the dry humor goes, I'm a shadow singer. Like,
I still love Az so much. I love him so much. So we are not going to spend a lot of time talking about the theories about what's going to happen in the next book and like who's doing what and where and everything, because we're going to save that for future discussions. But I feel like it's important to talk about Nesta's journey with Emery and Gwen. And
it wouldn't be our podcast if we didn't talk about female friendships.
Right. The female friendships that they discovered with each other, the sharing of the trauma, the finally accepting of everybody.
I'm going to start crying again because I'm going to tell, because you know this story, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think it was just so important to me. So a couple years ago, I was going through it, and Laura was in the States again for a super scientist conference with her husband, and it was in New Orleans this year, and she was back in the States, and I even said, I go, if wherever you are, I'll fly to. You're here, the least I can do is fly. But at the same time, she was the only person in the world who like knew, her and Sam were the only people in the world who knew what I was going through. And she said, she called up, like, we have this tiny little squad. We say it's our life squad. We've all been friends for like 16 plus years. And she didn't tell me, and she called them up and she goes, I can't tell you anything, but Jessica's coming and she needs us. And I cried in that moment when Gwen put her fear aside from everything, because she just knew that Nesta needed her. And she went to Windhaven. She was there with Emery, and she was there for Nesta. And that part, I was just crying because it just reminded me of our group so much. And they were just there. They didn't know why. They just had to show up. And Gwen just showed up. She didn't know why. She just knew she had to be there. And that's still one of my favorite memories. And I know that even Rachel was like, okay, you need to stop crying in the airport. People are going to think somebody died. It was just such a freaking mess. And it was just one of those things that sometimes you can be strong for so long. And then when you see your friends, like, it was definitely a moment for me where I didn't know I needed my friends till I saw them. And it was the best reunion I could have ever hoped and asked for. And we loved New Orleans forever before that, but I think like that was just such a special moment that I'll never forget it.
In that tiny little house.
We were, and that, I mean, we did everything. We did all the drinking. We did all the eating. It was wonderful. And it was just, you guys are the world to me.
Aw. Definitely one of my better moments as a person. Pulling everybody together for that. I don't have a lot of redeeming qualities, but that was a good one.
Shut up. You're like I put you on a pedestal.
That was a good one. That was one of my better moments. And it's a good way to go. Like, Nesta needed these people so much because she did the exact same thing that Faerie had, was she found out about the mating bond and lost her fucking mind and called in her bargain with Cass and, went away.
It should be noted that her growth in that moment, because I think Cass was even worried that she was like, the bargain is to break the mating bond. I'm sure that was probably what he was like, before you say anything. And she knew, like, if she hadn't done the internal work that she was continuing to do, she knew the type of person she would have retreated to be and say, like, she's like, I would have maimed him with my words, blah, blah, blah. And I know I've said on this podcast where I was like, I will find your emotional trigger and set you off. And I like that she recognized that she could do that, but she didn't want to do that. And she's like, we need like physical distance for me to simmer down. And even at the end of that chapter, she's like, I'm not going to give him 7 days. I'm going to talk to him tomorrow. Like, I just needed to, I need to do that. And obviously we know that that's not what happened. But
she'd put in the work at that point.
Yeah.
She'd really kind of, I don't know if she like conquered everything by then, but she was in a really good place, I feel like, by that point.
Was that that was after, it had to be immediately after they were in Spring Court. She like did the death point to Tamlin, and then they were just flying around for a while, and then they flew into downtown Valeris, right?
Probably. I'm all over the place with the
timeline.
The timeline. Spring Court, Tamlin, get over yourself. Cass has allergies. Those are my 2 takeaways from the Spring Court.
Here's some Benadryl, Cass.
Yeah, it's funny. It's pretty good. Okay, criticism that I have so many, but, and I don't mean to be just like negative. This book is not written for me. It's written for, like a subset of people. And I understand that. And objectively, it is a good book. I will reread it at some point where I'm not like tainted by the toxicity of the fandom and what was going on. So I understand all of this, but
I love hearing your thoughts on everything, because everything you're saying, I go, yeah, you're right. You're right. I have nothing to counter it, because you're right. I just had a different experience, but I think this goes back to what we said at the beginning of the episode. It was a lot of like, oh shit, that I have a lot to unpack that I thought was already unpacked, but I guess we haven't hit that yet.
Something that really bothered me about Gwyn and Emery and Nesta is that Nesta, this is her found family. We know this. We know in the beginning of the book she hated that Faerie called the Inner Circle her family. But I did not really like how Faerie calls Emery and Gwyn like her sisters. And like, these are my real sisters. I understand the trope. I understand that she needed the female friendship to like reestablish what it felt like to be a sister. And I understand all of her like issues with Faerie, and I get it. Like, objectively, I understand. It just grated on me that she's doing this, but she has her blood sisters, Elaine and Faerie, who have been trying to pull her out for 2 years. And all Nesta needed to do, I mean, not all, we understand there's a lot. Her power is very scary. Her trauma is terrible. Even like when she's having the nightmare and Rhys goes in her mind and like he's horrified. Like we understand the trauma is immense. But all she had to do was talk to her like blood sisters, and they would have been there for her. But she shat on that. She shat on every opportunity to reconcile with them. And then she goes and creates her own like family. Like I get it, but it also really bothered me
that she put in the work with her found sisters and not her biological sisters. Would you have a different opinion if? And I know you've shared that you are an only child. Would you have had a different opinion if she was putting in the work both? You know, like she was putting in the work with her biological sisters while also putting in the work with her found sisters. Because, like, I'm somebody who has put in, you know, the work and continue to put in the work with my own siblings. That doesn't mean it's easy, and there's definitely, and I'm sure I'm not the only person where there are people in your life where you're closer with your friends than certain members of your family, to the point where you consider your friends and like your extended family. So it's not like the effort. And would you have had a different opinion if Nesta was putting in the work and it just wasn't being reciprocated, essentially?
Yes. She didn't try at all. Is kind of what it is. Like she has all these issues with Faerie. She has her mommy issues, her grandma issues, her daddy issues. She's got all the issues.
Her mom was a big character for not being a character in this book.
Yeah, and her grandma was also in there, and like we know all of her daddy issues, but like it's more like this sister thing. You know, like these sisters have been trying for 2 years to help you, and you didn't let them help you. And now you have these other, your friends who you love that you haven't known very long, who you have bonded with over like your shared trauma, and you can share stuff with them, and you've like bared everything fine. But it's just the balance isn't there. And I understand that you have to relearn how to like love and all of that. And I know that at the end of the book, when Faerie is dying in the Breaking Dawn baby scene, that she says to Faerie that she loves her and the sister bond is fixed. I get that. All I'm saying is that not putting in the work with her blood sisters and putting it all into her found family and calling them her sisters, it bothered me, because all that was needed was a little bit of communication about anything from Nesta, and her family blood sisters would have been there for her in the same way.
That's a consistent thing that I know I've heard you say throughout our podcast, is the lack of communication. If you just communicated and shared this, and I agree with you, and my counter argument is, but that's not life. Like, who communicates perfectly? Even as a communications major, I can't communicate great, I talk for a living, and that still doesn't get me shit. So,
well, let's pivot and say the communication between the inner circle not telling Faerie that the baby was going to kill her. I don't have a problem with that, because they were actively working to find a solution that they could present her, because they were never like not gonna tell her. They were working to find a solution so that when they did tell her, she didn't freak out. She could be presented with options, because we all know that level of like fear and like
that festers in a pregnancy. They always tell you like
that could upset the baby.
Like when my stepmom was pregnant, like because my dad had remarried, my brother and I, we were older. There's a large age difference between my younger siblings and I. And so we were like 10 and 8 or 10 and 7 or something. And we would bicker, or even 13 and 10. And my father would say, like, you can't upset your stepmom. She's pregnant, blah, blah, blah. Emotions can't run high. You can't have tension, blah, blah, blah. I'm just like, we're literally preteens and teenagers. Like, how are you going to tell kids to be perfect? But, there was fear there. We were ruled under fear, so it happened. But you hear about that in pregnancies all the time. Like, the emotions that you surround yourself with can affect the pregnancy. So I do understand where they were coming from. I also think she should have known, which is why when Nesta did and said the way she did, it was out of spite, and she was like, oh, how does it feel now to be hidden? Like, how does that feel? And do I think it was right? No. Do I know where she was coming from? Absolutely. That's the thing with this whole book, is I'm not in one direction, because I see both sides of the same coin. I see it throughout the whole book. I see the balance. You're like, you got this going on, but you also have this going on. Ooh, that's just my take. I was very back and forth the whole book.
And I was not. So that's why we're saying, like, we had very different experiences with this book. I just want to toot my own horn and say that I was correct with my theory about Nesta taking the blood right.
I was so glad.
Huzzah!
The takeaway. Was I right about anything? I wasn't right about. I don't even think I had theories.
I need to go back and listen to see if you were right. I don't know.
I think it was just like I really just wanted to be back in Valaris. I think the only thing I was right about is drunk Cassian.
Yeah, true. He's like, I'm too drunk. You got to stay here. I'm too drunk to fly us home. Everybody's going to be too drunk to...
And then like Az and Moore couldn't, they were so drunk they can't even winnow. I loved that. I just want to drink with them.
A big criticism about this book is that after training for like 3 months or whatever, these women, they're not girls, these women should not have been able to win the right.
Compared to the people who have been doing this their whole life.
Yeah.
But to what I say about that is women could do anything. There's a lot of times that women can do anything men can do, and we do it in heels. Like, that's how I feel sometimes. You don't have to tell us twice. Like, we do it. But there's a lot of like, the focus here, which you know from the Valkyries, is the teamwork aspect. Like, they succeeded because of teamwork, whereas the Blood Right was very much something that was supposed to be like a very individual right. And yeah, you made alliances, but those alliances were meant to break. And just like Reese, Az, and Cass, they were stronger together. Like, yeah, they got the brute part out of it because they were able to kill everybody. But just because the girls didn't they killed people, but they didn't completely slay everybody. They used their brain, found each other, and the made items, with the help with the made items.
Barbie friendship bracelets.
It was so
whatever.
cheesy.
They needed to be it needed to be something. It just...
As an Archeron sister, I'd be pissed if you didn't make me a bracelet. Not just like a bracelet. If it was a bracelet, I'm like, keep your fucking bracelet. But then I found out it was a made bracelet. Bitch, where's mine?
I agree with you, of course. Teamwork, whatever. I also feel like a big part of them being able to win the right was that they were being directly trained by the best. Right?
And the people who have won the right.
Who have won, yeah. So they have Cassian and Azrael. They're training everybody. They make the obstacle course. They know the layout. They know everything that's going to happen. They are giving them all of the tools that they need to succeed, where I feel like in the Illyrian camps, the focus isn't really, as you said, it isn't on that. It's more like an individual type thing. And Kaz and Az were training them as a unit.
And I didn't even think of that till you said that. They were training them. They have won the right. They were training them as such. And then you find out they change the course every day, not to just challenge them. It was various courses that are there in the right. So it wasn't like this idea of we're just going to make it difficult for you. They were literally giving them exposure. And here's course 1, and here's course 2, and here's course 3, because courses 1 through a zillion, those were the those were the obstacles they would be encountering if they chose that path. And I thought that was, like, you bringing that up, that's a really good point.
And then, of course, we have Nesta's last stand on the mountain, right? Like, the girls, they're not girls. Why do I keep saying that? The women. Gwen and Emery make it up there, they've got it. Nesta is holding off the queen, and it was very confusing.
Like an alias. The reason the Blood Right exists.
Right.
She's doing it just like an alias. I thought that was good. I liked that. I loved that. I love that she held him off. That whole scene.
Cassian's being controlled. He goes to stab himself, but then he's just on the ground. And
how about when she really, this is what I was going to say earlier, when she releases all of that power that she hasn't really used, it reminded me of Aelin releasing all of her power in Annie L.
For the wave.
Where, yeah, she was not going to let him die. Because but prior to that, leading up until that point, she's like, because my mate taught me. And she had already accepted it. She had accepted it. We already knew that the mating bond had snapped into place, but she finally embraced the term. And she wasn't that was it. She was not going to let somebody take him from her again.
It was good. Am I fuzzy on the queen and her whole purpose? Yes. Am I fuzzy about Eris and his guards? Yes. Am I fuzzy on the Trove and what happened in the prison?
Yes.
Yeah. What the fuck is going on?
Okay, so we talk about the Trove and the prison, the harp. I know we talked about the horn in Crescent City, but the harp and the 26 strings and the bringing you to other worlds and word gates, and I'm sorry, I'm waiting for that crossover, and I'm going to scream of enjoyment because it's there. It's all there. And I love, you brought up a good point nobody has talked about from the first 6 chapters is it's not just a globe on Rhys's desk. Take it away.
Well, it's got. He says, like, I use this to, like, stare and, like, think about, like, the universes and, like, other worlds, and it shows, like, other, like, things, and it's really important, and of course this is in, like, Kaz's point of view, and he's just like, this is boring, I'm not going to pay attention to this, but the fandom is just like, pay attention to this.
Have you seen anybody on TikTok or anybody discuss this?
No.
No.
And Rhys built this. I mean, let's not forget that. Like, he's interested in this study. I feel like he is the one who is kind of directing the research in the library about all of this. It's not really discussed, like, who's kind of backing.
Oh, where, like, Clotho is in and Meryl.
Yeah, like Meryl's research.
And everything.
I feel like Rhys is the one that's kind of directing that research. It's not discussed, but, it is what it is. Yeah, no one has talked about the globe apparatus in Rhys's office, but Sarah's really driving it home. We got Aelin falling from the sky. We must assume, right? We have
to assume.
Yeah, because Feyre is still pregnant.
And at first I didn't initially know if it was like her first pregnancy or second pregnancy and I think that was just the fan art skewing my image because she's in a purple dress, but that fan art was made prior to this book. So I didn't know if this was like a second pregnancy, but even if we take the globe part, if the Aelin part of it away, it is driven about portals and word gates and time, space and time of it all.
Oh yeah, and the fucking Russian Death Lord, what's his name?
Kostche.
He's like the deathless, like the timeless or whatever. Like, he predates Prythian, so he obviously got there from somewhere else, right? Like, in the book it says, like, he predates Prythian, so he got there from somewhere. There's all of this emphasis on the worlds on top of each other, and traveling through everything. We have the harp, and we know that the harp can manipulate time and all of that. So it's very interesting. Of course, we know Crescent City is the next book that's coming out, so it'll be interesting to see if there's any of that, because we already know from the first Crescent City that there is crossover in there with The Walking Dead and with the Book of Breathing. So,
and also with I know we've had conversations regarding, like, how does Sarah's mind work, because she's essentially, especially towards the tail end of Throne of Glass, she was finishing Throne of Glass. She was clearly writing Crescent City 2, or the first Crescent City, and still in this ACOTAR world. So I think of that meme from Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where it's like the crazy murder board scene. I just imagine that's kind of what's going on with Sarah's head, where she's, okay, but Throne of Glass is wrapped, but she's already had the exposure of, like, word gates and portals and all this stuff. So is she also going to be venturing off, what we can assume, because she's an author, a new series, not a prequel, but not a sequel either? I don't, maybe something along the same universe where the fan art is, because I would love it, where we see all this fan art of Rowan and Aelin's kid and Rhys and Feyre's kid, and that being a new trajectory, if there is these crazy crossovers. That I mean, again, it's just a theory, but you just don't know where her writing goes or where her mind goes, or if she doesn't, or, for all we know, nothing's going to be integrated. There's so much there to not think something's not going to come out of it.
As long as we're on the topic of children, we can start wrapping up this episode. I know we're running a little long, about the Breaking Dawn pregnancy scene. Good God. It surprised me that the concept of a C-section was, like, shocking to everybody. They're like, oh, you're going to cut her open. It's like, okay.
That, and that it couldn't work.
Yeah.
I know they explain it, because somebody even said, like, why don't you just have a C-section, and not those exact terms. And I know it's said in the world why it wouldn't work, but it just didn't make sense to me. The whole thing didn't make sense to me. I was thinking, I really thought that Nesta was going to fight off death. I didn't think she was going to give up her cauldron power. I thought death was going to show up and she was going to say no, like Dean did when death came, when, you know, the four horsemen came and death came for Dean, and Dean was like, no.
Oh, and Dean struck bargains, right? Yeah. Sarah has a history of stripping the most powerful female characters of their power. So I wasn't really surprised by that.
Oh, I'm caught up and I didn't even pick up on that.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by that. She does that.
I feel like she could have used her powers to say, you do the C-section, I will heal her. To like, I just feel like there were different ways that could have gone about it, because my heart broke for Rhys, because you had Az and Cass like physically having to restrain them, and even that was difficult because he was feeling that his mating bond break again, and he's already basically gone through it twice from Under the Mountain, and then again in ACOWAR, feeling his mate ripped from her. I felt so bad for that man, my poor Rhys.
And then, bigger picture, knowing himself that he is also seconds away from dying. So it's not just Faerie dying. It's not just the baby dying. It's also him dying.
I don't think that he was considering himself in that moment, though.
No, probably not like awareness-wise.
Oh, but like physically. Because she was dying his bargain.
Yeah.
Like the bargain was just like when the bargain was like getting pulled off of Cass.
Yeah,
this bargain
he felt
was,
it. Yeah,
okay.
So, I feel like there's a lot going on there. With the Faerie chapter that we knew was coming, I didn't think that either of them are going to die. You know, the suicide pact is...
I forgot about that. You had to remind me. And it was reminded in the book. I completely forgot about that.
It was reckless, but at the time we were all like, oh, how sweet. But like now, seeing its implications, we're like, damn, that's reckless. I agree with Amren.
Amren was like, oh, stupid people in love.
Yeah, you stupid fucking fools. Like, you're the leaders of this, like, territory. How could you do this? I mean, and then some level I totally agree with her. But when it happened, I was like, oh, that's so sweet. Like, you know, right. In and out, you know, whatever. But now it's annoying. Something that really fucking annoyed me about this was Nesta giving up her powers but demanding that they change her anatomy so that she can have Cass's babies. That struck me. I was just like, ugh, God.
We've had this conversation outside of the podcast. I just don't understand. To each their own. Nothing against it. I just don't understand why there's this assumption that every happily ever after has to end with kids. And I just, you know, I understand. I get why she did it, but I really I don't know.
Yeah. Didn't sit well with me.
And that it had to be said. Like I also, even if it did happen, I could have done without it being said.
I did appreciate when Nesta was telling Cassian this. He was like, you're ready to have babies? And she was like, no.
Oh, yeah.
No.
Are you kidding me? I'm still taking my tonic. Thank you very much.
So I did appreciate that. That kind of made it a little bit better. But it was just like, God. The whole birth scene, whatever. The book ending with Faerie... before that, Nesta putting on the mask and, you know, having her little heart-to-heart with Faerie and Faerie actually hearing her, and then, like, the forgiveness, and then Rhys falling on his knees, which is the second time he's done that in this book, because he did it to Helion as well, you know, begging and thanking Nesta.
And he also said he would kneel to no one except his crown and his mate, and this was both for his mate.
Yeah. So, again, not out of character.
Not out of character.
Yeah, no, totally in character.
I will fight for Rhys. I might not like all his choices, but I will fight anybody on Rhys.
And the thing that I did like about Nesta in this moment is she finally sees Rhys as like a brother.
Yeah.
And that is just kind of indicative of all her growth over this 700-plus page book.
And he wasn't against her. I mean, he was in some points. But... she accepted it like as a brother, not just here's my in-law, like a brother.
Yeah, as a brother. It was nice. And then of course the book ends, you know, she finally goes and visits her dad's grave, and that, you know, it's nice. Like she needed to do that. The daddy issues were the root of kind of all of her problems, and she solved that. So she made her full journey, and now her journey's over, and now we can pivot to somebody else, and I hope it's Az.
It has to be Az, because I cannot deal with a fucking book on Elaine.
No, we've already. I know it has
I mean,
to be.
and you know what? There's still a lot that we didn't discuss that we can discuss in that future surprise episode that we're gonna have, where we didn't talk about the ball scene. We didn't talk about Eris at all.
Yeah, and
at all.
Nesta is like this prolific dancer with no practice ever. She's just like.
I like that she. What I really like about Nesta is the level of petty and things that she will do for spite. I am here for. It might not be healthy, but I absolutely love. I mean, from everything she does, like even with like the table scene, the dining room scene, that he was like, you can't keep doing that. I'm gonna go. And the satisfaction that she has on her face where she's like, I did that. And then when she wins Eris on the dance floor, just because of her dancing skills and like her seduction techniques and just playing courtier, I love that pettiness. Or even taking the Duke away from like the bitchy girl who was bad towards her sister. And she goes, yeah, I just did it because I could. I like that. And I'm not a mean girl, I don't think. I've never done that in real life.
You respect the petty, and there's nothing wrong with respecting the petty.
I think I respect it because if I could do something like that, I would.
Final thoughts.
I liked the book. Maybe in a couple weeks it might change, because I also looked at my Goodreads review for Frost and Starlight like a couple weeks ago because I was updating something. And I had embarrassingly wrote, I think this is the best one in the entire series. Am I on crack? Was I drunk when I wrote that? Because that is clearly not the best book in the entire series. And I know that I didn't even know I wrote that. Like, I had to write that drunk and I was definitely on the ACOWAR high because it was just all fluff. And that's definitely not the best. We acknowledge that ACOFAE is not the best. I didn't even remember I wrote it. So I will definitely read it again. I think I'm past my book hangover for now. I love Cass. I love Cass. I love Cass. Reese is my number 1 and Cass is my number 2.
Fratty, batty, horsecock Cass.
Oh, please. Please. What are your final thoughts?
My final thoughts are I will reread this book when the fucking drama, bullying, and toxicity of the fandom has calmed down.
That shit needs to stop. Yeah.
Yeah, when that has calmed down, I will read this book and reevaluate it through, like, less, I don't know, just ickiness. And maybe now that, like, I know where it's going and I know, like, the plot points and stuff, I can
or lack thereof
kind of pay attention to that more. Yeah, and the sex scenes won't, like, jar me as much as they did. So I can kind of reevaluate everything. But I'm just glad that Nesta has gotten over everything and she can be a productive member of the inner circle, because it's very clear that they're going to war and we can finally look at the big picture.
It'll be interesting to see now that she has, I mean, not to say that when you go through your healing, all of a sudden everything's okay. Like, it's constant work. But it will be, you bring up a good point, it will be interesting to see her role in this whole story and the series goes towards now. Just like with Throne of Glass, where we started getting to know these characters more, and I say this specifically regarding Caltine, Alid, and Lysandra, because we know where my opinions were with them initially, and seeing how they played out in the end, it will be interesting to see now that she has had this redemption book.
She's got her shit together now.
Where that's going to take us.
Yep, and how she can take charge and, like, affect the world around her instead of internalizing everything and being forced to do things, you know. She never actually willingly, well, I guess she did willingly do some things in ACOWAR, but now it's not like pulling teeth to get her to do things. She's a part of the unit, and she also has her own Valkyrie unit. Right. So how she uses that situation, and, you know, now's not the time and place to speculate, but it sets it up for a lot of nice plot that's going to happen. So, final thoughts. I mean, it's good. It's good.
This was a productive, healthy conversation. It should be an example to people. Not that we're examples, and nobody should ever try to do what we've done in our past.
Well, we're grown
if you
women.
want to have fun, like totally do what we've done in our past.
We're grown women. We own and accept and respect choices and opinions and all of that. So, wow. I'm sure this is going to be a long episode, but thank you for listening. We really appreciate you. And we have something special coming soon.
Soon, yeah. And this episode, it should be March 1st. We wanted to give a couple weeks. People are still processing. People are still getting their books. I mean, the devastation that's going down south, I mean, it's where we grew up. There's a lot. We know those states. We've been to these places. They're not prepared for this, you know? I mean, COVID makes it even harder. So my heart really does go out to them. If I could physically be there, I probably would, because it just sucks, you know, to want to be able to support, and you physically can't for a lot of these people. It is March 1st, our episode that we're receiving. So next week will be our the dreaded Empire of Storms episode. Feel free to follow us on Instagram, ACOFAE Podcast, ACOFAE Podcast. We're also both on TikTok now, ACOFAE Jessica, ACOFAE, and ACOFAE Laura. We're just those people who are still learning TikTok, but we'll put snippets out there. We try to fake memes, and really we're still just trying to find our creative outlets a year after we've been in lockdown.
Thank you for joining us. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.